Tonight on the Daily Wrap, former CIA Director and Ambassador James Woolsey joins me in studio to discuss the Iran deal. And if it's Wednesday, the insults must be flying between the Bush and Trump camps. We get another look into Secretary of State Clinton's emails and ask you, the public, if you support building the wall on the southern border. We've got all that, plus a whole lot more, including your viewer comments, tonight right here on the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome, everybody. I'm Rick Unger. My co-host Joe Concha has the day off, but joining us tonight is speaker, author, patriot, and former Navy SEAL Carl Higbie. And to his right, the chief strategist over at Bell Point, David Nelson, joins up. And finally, to his right, the assistant online editor for Commentary Magazine, Noah Rothman, is back on the panel. Now that we've introduced one and all, let's get right to the Daily Download. Today, Maryland Senator Barbara Mikulski announced that she would support the Iran nuclear deal, giving the White House all the votes it needs to prevent the GOP from scuttling a veto. In response to Mikulski's decision and support, Secretary of State John Kerry decided to take a quick victory lap.
Obviously, 34 votes are enough votes for the president's veto to be able to be upheld, but we're not, that's not the way we're approaching this. We want anybody and everybody, hopefully, to be able to vote for it. We're going to continue to try to persuade people up until the last moment, and our hope is that that number will grow, obviously. But it is enough to sustain the president's veto.
Now, following this morning's events, I sat down one-on-one with former CIA Director Ambassador James Woolsey. Ambassador, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm going to repeat what I said to you before we got started. I love getting to interview you because you have this funny way of making sense. Even when I don't agree with you, you make sense. And that's something that I think is a real plus.
I'm sorry to screw things up. That's a weird thing in Washington.
This is not in vogue. So let me start with a very wide, general question. I want your take on this Iranian nuclear deal and what you think of it.
Much, much worse than worthless.
Really?
If it were just worthless, we wouldn't have to spend a great deal of time on it. Wouldn't do much. But not only does it turn loose at least $100 billion, somewhere maybe up to $150 billion, into the hands, essentially, of the Revolutionary Guard to run terrorism throughout the Middle East and help Iran dominate its neighbors, which it very much is in the process of doing. It also will have the effect of frightening virtually all of Iran's neighbors, and so a number of the Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, others, will almost certainly also obtain nuclear weapons, as the Iranians will be in the process of doing.
Just sticking on that line for a second, don't you kind of suspect that a nation like Saudi Arabia already purchased a nuclear weapon before from Pakistan?
Maybe, maybe not. It requires some care and expertise to manage storing, taking care of all of this, and what you're doing can leak. It may not be the case that the actual weapons have spread around too much beyond Pakistan, and now, I'm afraid, in the process, going to Iraq and as well as Iran.
So if you talk to people who tend to be supportive of this agreement, you never hear somebody say, oh yes, I absolutely love this. There's always that reservation. There are problems I have with the deal, but one of the problems that almost everybody seems to have with the deal is the front payment of this money that we've held frozen for so long. We're in essence giving it back now as a condition, we'll call it a precondition to making the deal. I think we understand that that's a problem. But what do you say to people who will say, you know what are our alternatives? People keep saying, well, make a better deal. But you've been there. People should remember, by the way, that you have once been the director of the CIA. So you have been in this place.
I've also been the head negotiator for one major arms control treaty and an advisor or delegate, presidential delegate to three others. And if I had come back in any of the negotiations that I was in with something that provided that the U.S. Congress could not be told what the substance of the restriction was, that the American people couldn't be told, that, as you said, $150 billion is turned loose for the leading terrorist state in the world to do what it will, and that the restrictions are all going to go away within a few years, and the path, even with no cheating, the path toward a nuclear weapon for Iran would be broad, wide, and obvious. If they cheat, which they will and they always have, then a lot faster. I mean, there's, as I said, I think it's definitely much worse than worthless.
What do you say to those, knowing what you do about intelligence, and that's a fairly large amount, what do you say to those who suggest because we have this deal, we'll actually be in a better position should we have to attack Iran because we'll know where their various locations are?
I don't think we're going to find out where the locations
of their material is
that way. I mean, I hope we have a very good handle on where everything they've got that is strategically important, whether nuclear related or not, is. But I don't think the treaty is going to help us. They will secrete stuff. They will do what they have done before. They will dig new facilities inside deep mountains. They will lie. The Iranian people are a wonderful people in practically every way. This government of theirs now is theocratic, totalitarian, genocidal imperialists, and each of those words denotes a specific approach. It's not just, they're not just expletives. Theocratic, of course, they are ruled by their mullahs. Totalitarian, massacred the young people who were out in '09 protesting the election of Ahmadinejad was stolen. Certainly they are racist, religiously motivated for exterminating basically the Jews and the Americans. Let's kill all the Jews, let's kill all the Americans. And this is not some obscure side gang.
But you would agree that we rarely find ourselves in a position negotiating a treaty or an agreement like this with our friends.
Well, there's a big gap between friends and Iran. In the middle there are other circumstances. For example, I've negotiated 4 times with the Soviets. Right. And the first 3 times it was pretty tense in a lot of circumstances back at the end of the 60s and then in the 70s. By the late 80s, as they saw the handwriting on the wall that things might come apart for them, and then in '89, once the Berlin Wall went down, they got a lot easier to deal with. They were still communist dictators, but
the leverage had shifted.
But yeah, absolutely, and the ability to go out and have a drink and dinner with your Soviet counterpart and tell jokes and talk about your kids easier, and right? Stuff. Yeah, it got easier.
So, you know, if you look at this now and you say, all right, we would have been, I think you probably say this, we'd have been better off if we had never sat down and made this deal. Would we not still then be on a trajectory towards having to do something about a nuclear-armed Iran?
I think what we should do now is for the leadership of the Senate to say, whoops, we messed up by having this bill.
Which we learned this morning is not going to happen.
Well, this that I'm about to suggest I don't think has been seriously proposed except by Andy McCarthy, who is a marvelous constitutional scholar. He says, and I agree with him, this is clearly a serious enough agreement that under any history of U.S. negotiations, this should be a treaty.
Right. I actually agree with that.
And so what we ought to do is now the Senate require it to be taken up as a treaty, and when the Obama administration waxes wroth, let them wax wroth, and you know, they would need to get two-thirds.
We have what was SALT II? We never got it ratified by the Senate, but we still put it into effect.
Sort of, kinda.
Well,
I mean, the SALT and START treaties, their current condition is complex. And so I don't really think that arms control treaties are the instrumentalities of having gotten countries out of nuclear weapons. That's been done by the Israeli Air Force the American Air Force, and sanctions.
So they're telling me I have to wrap it up, which I'm very disappointed because I want to keep going. I hope you'll come back and continue this.
Please invite me.
And